Welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in North America and around the globe. My name's Gavin Gray. Our top stories. Donald Trump says he hasn't ruled out military action against North Korea, but he warns of the consequences of conflict.
North Korea is maybe more important than trade. Trade is very important. But massive warfare with millions, potentially millions of people being killed, that, as we would say, trumps trade.
Tornadoes hit Texas, leaving at least 9 people dead and nearly 50 in hospital. Emergency services say they fear the death toll may rise. International tributes to Uli Steck, one of the world's best-known mountaineers who was killed in an accident on Mount Everest. And 10 years after the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, her parents tell the BBC they'll do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to find their daughter. Hello. President Trump has warned that a conflict with North Korea, which is trying to develop nuclear weapons, could kill millions of people. He argued that getting Chinese help to deal with North Korea was more important than becoming involved in a trade dispute with Beijing. In an interview with CBS News, he also described the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, as a pretty smart cookie. Sarah Corker has the latest.
So far, mounting diplomatic pressure has not stopped North Korea accelerating its weapons program. Pyongyang has launched 2 failed missile tests in the last 2 weeks, the latest one on Saturday. And in a wide-ranging interview on US television, President Trump stepped up the rhetoric.
If he does a nuclear test, I will not be happy. And I can tell you also, I don't believe that the president of China, who is a very respected man, will be happy either.
You mean military action?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
But he also warned of the consequences of conflict.
Massive warfare with millions, potentially millions of people being killed.
And a reminder of America's military might, the arrival of the USS Carl Vinson in waters off the Korean peninsula this weekend. Tensions in the region have intensified, with both North and South Korea conducting military exercises. And when asked about North Korea's young leader, Mr. Trump questioned his sanity, but also had these surprising words of praise.
At a very young age, he was able to assume power. A lot of people, I'm sure, tried to take that power away, whether it was his uncle or anybody else. And he was able to do it. So obviously, he's a pretty smart cookie.
Mr. Trump's comments come as he marked 100 days in office at a rally in Pennsylvania. In that time, he's hosted China's President Xi, who he says is now putting pressure on North Korea, its ally, to scale back its nuclear ambitions. Meanwhile, the US is installing an anti-missile system in South Korea, activity that's attracted some protest from local people. And it sparked this reaction from Pyongyang. Its state-run news agency urged the US to ponder over the catastrophic consequences to be entailed by their foolish military provocation. And so for President Trump, the question of what to do about North Korea remains his toughest foreign policy test. Sarah Corker, BBC News.
In the USA, tornadoes that hit a number of Midwestern states on Saturday evening have left at least 9 people dead and more than 50 in hospital. Missouri and Oklahoma are now in a state of emergency, and as Tiffany Worthamus reports, the intensive weather system is still causing damage across eastern Texas.
This was one of the killer tornadoes that hit the city of Canton, 80 kilometres east of Dallas, on Saturday afternoon. The funnel crosses a major road. Cars pull over not knowing which way it will turn.
There is a tornado crossing the road right in front of us.
Sites like these are not uncommon. This area is called Tornado Alley because of its frequent twisters, but they still pack a deadly punch. This storm brought with it a rare late-season blizzard further north in Kansas, Colorado and Wyoming. There's also been flash flooding across a number of states, with fears the death toll could rise further. Among the victims, a 10-year-old girl swept away by rushing waters in Arkansas and a fire chief who was hit by a car. A number of people are still missing.
We're all sitting in the hallway and our roof collapsed on us. And by the time it was all over, we went outside. We had a three-level house. We were down to the last level, and half of that roof was gone.
Sucked the house right off on top of us. The roof and everything collapsed on us. Me and a buddy of mine shielded the kids with the roof.
From the sky, the devastation is clear. Cars strewn across fields, houses flattened. The trail of destruction is massive, 24 kilometres wide and 56 kilometres long. There's no power here. The tornado ripped up 3 transmission stations. It's prompted the governors of Missouri and Oklahoma to declare a state of emergency. First thing Sunday morning, cleanup crews swung into action, but many people who've lost their homes don't know where to start. Any buildings too dangerous to enter have been branded with red paint by emergency crews. A tornado warning is still in place in Texas, where strong winds of up to 95 kilometres an hour and heavy rain is set to continue. Tiffany Werthermer, BBC News.
Well, let's get the very latest live from Texas now. And Luann Campbell is a journalist with the Tyler Morning Telegraph and has spent the day in the tornado zone. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. First of all, can you begin to describe what conditions are like and what you've seen today?
Well, our photographer and I, we went out there this morning, and when we got on the ground, as soon as we drove up to Canton, we were traveling in from headed west into Canton on Highway 64, and when we about 2 miles out, I could start seeing the destruction. Traffic slowed down, power lines were down, trees were down, and it was just mainly in that one area. When I drove through the city of Canton, everything was fine except there were no stoplights, the power was out, and but traffic was moving along just fine. Everybody seemed to be okay. There were four-way stops set up at all the intersections where the traffic lights were down. We went to a news conference, and then we dispersed out through the city, and we just we went around the county most of the day just trying to find people to talk to and seeing what they had been through and how they were doing.
And how are the services, the rescue efforts going? Of course, they fear a number of people are missing still.
Right now, there are 2 people that are missing and unaccounted for. We do not know their names. They would not release those to us, but they are working to find those people. There are 4. I'm sorry?
And the weather as well at the moment, obviously, is pretty severe. But what's the forecast over the next 24, 48 hours?
Right now, the weather looks pretty good. There's no chance of severe storms that we know of in the next 24 to 48 hours. The weather has moved out. From what I see, there is sunshine predicted tomorrow. It was a bit cool today, but the sun was out most of the day.
All right. Thanks very much. Luann Campbell, they're a journalist with Tyler Morning Telegraph. Thank you. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making news this hour. The owner of an Iranian television network has been shot dead in the Turkish city of Istanbul. Saeed Karimian is driving a business partner when masked gunmen opened fire on their vehicle. Mr. Karimian's network, Gem TV, broadcasts foreign and Western shows in Iran. The assailant's vehicle, a Jeep, was reportedly later found abandoned and burnt out. The United Nations says 36 members of ethnic Yazidis held as slaves by the Islamic State group have been freed in Iraq. The group includes men, women and children who were in captivity for nearly 3 years. The UN believes up to 1,500 women and girls are still being held. The former Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has been re-elected as leader of the governing Democratic Party. His rivals conceded before all the votes were counted. Mr. Renzi resigned 2 months ago following a crushing defeat in a referendum on proposed constitutional reforms. And the former billionaire Eike Batista, who was once one of the world's richest men, has left prison in Brazil for house arrest ahead of a corruption trial. Batista was worth more than $30 billion 5 years ago, but lost much of it as his empire collapsed. He's been accused by federal prosecutors of bribery and hiding illegal funds offshore. One of the world's most accomplished mountaineers, Olli Steck, has been killed in an accident on Mount Everest. Known as the Swiss Machine, he was climbing alone in preparation for a new route up the mountain. He'd won numerous awards and was celebrated for the speed of his climbs. Andrew Bryson reports.
Mount Everest, dangerous and daunting, even for the most experienced of climbers. Olli Steck, also known as the Swiss Machine, knew its dangers. He climbed Everest without oxygen in 2012. 3 years later, he reached the summit of all 82 alpine peaks over 4,000 metres in just 62 days. And he conquered the north face of the Eiger in less than 3 hours. Olli Steck was on Everest to acclimatise. He died preparing a new route on the summit. His body has now been recovered, and fellow mountaineers have paid tribute.
If he'd been successful in this, it would have really pushed him into another sphere. I mean, first ascent like that on Everest. It is just sinking in at the moment, I must say. You know, he was known as the Swiss Machine, you know, a really fit guy, lovely guy when you meet him. You know, a sort of petite guy, really, a bundle of energy.
When reaching summits, Olli Steck was known for his speed and ruthlessly methodical approach. The climbing community says it has lost a pioneer. Andrew Bryson, BBC News.
In Venezuela, at least 29 people have died in April as a result of the political unrest, many due to gunshot wounds. Spiralling inflation, food shortages and a call for new elections have brought thousands out onto the streets. President Nicolas Maduro has announced a 60% increase in the minimum wage. That's the third increase this year. This comes ahead of more pro-government and opposition marches planned this week. We take a look back now at a month of protests.
Siempre meto los tapabocas por si los voy a necesitar. No meto mayor cosa. El vinagre. Llevo un agua. Estamos listos. Sí se ve gente ya que va marchando y van también como uno, ya están cansados, están hartos de una cola, de hacer colas, que si el número de cédula, que si hoy no me toca, que si hoy había harina pan y yo no puedo comprar. O sea, la gente se cansó, yo creo, de eso. Estoy luchando por mi país, tengo una hija de 17 años y he decidido luchar porque tengo que sacar a ella adelante y por el país.
Images there of the last month in Venezuela. We'll stay with us here on BBC News because still to come. As the UK election campaign continues, Theresa May rules out increasing VAT for the next 5 years, but refuses to say whether she will raise other taxes.
Nothing, it seems, was too big to withstand the force of the tornado. The extent of the devastation will lead to renewed calls for government help to build better housing.
Internationally, there have already been protests. Sweden says it received no warning of the accident. Indeed, the Russians at first denied anything had gone wrong. Only when radioactivity levels began to increase outside Russia were they forced to admit the accident.
For the Mujahideen, the mood here is of great celebration. This is the end of a 12-year war for them. They've taken the capital, which they've been fighting for so long.
It was 7 o'clock in the morning, on the day when power began to pass from the minority to the majority, when Africa, after 300 years, reclaimed its last white colony.
This is BBC News, and these are the latest headlines. President Trump says the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is a pretty smart cookie, while also warning that a conflict involving Pyongyang could kill millions of people. And tornadoes hit Texas, leaving at least 9 people dead and nearly 50 in hospital. Emergency services say they fear the death toll may rise. Here in the UK, Theresa May says there'll be no increase in VAT, a retail tax, if the Conservatives win the general election, with Labour saying it wouldn't increase the tax either. Mrs May has also made it clear she expects hard talks with the European Union over Brexit. Here's our political correspondent, Ben Wright.
Working people in this country have paid enough tax. As this economy recovers, I want you to be able to keep more of your own money to spend as you choose.
It was a startling policy, a solemn promise made days before the 2015 general election. David Cameron said 3 key taxes, VAT, income tax and national insurance, would not go up for a 5-year parliament. So will Theresa May repeat that pledge in her manifesto?
We have absolutely no plans to increase the level of tax, but I'm also very clear that I don't want to make specific proposals on taxes unless I'm absolutely sure that I can deliver on those.
A pretty strong hint the Prime Minister does not think the existing tax freeze can be continued. And remember, just last month, the Chancellor's plan to raise a national insurance rate in the budget was criticised for breaking the manifesto tax pledge, and the move was ditched. Why does all this matter? Because public services cost money. Politicians need to decide how to balance the growing demands of hospitals, schools, social care, defence, with voters' willingness to pay. Today there was clarity from the Prime Minister on one part of the Conservatives' tax pledge.
We won't be increasing VAT.
But no matching promise on national insurance or income tax, the other big revenue raisers.
I know I'm going to get told off for overlong answers, so this won't be an overlong answer.
Labour has also promised not to raise VAT and is making a lot of spending promises, which it says will be costed in their manifesto.
We're the party that wants low taxes for low and medium earners. The Conservative Party are the party that wants low taxes for the high earners. We look at things the other way around. And so, yes, there will be changes, but there will be very, very much at the top end.
Over the next couple of weeks, we'll get the party manifestos, when rhetoric over tax and spending may crystallise into policy. But of all the uncertainties facing Britain over the next few years, the biggest is Brexit. And there seems to be a divide between Theresa May and the rest of the EU over how the negotiations should happen. Yesterday, EU leaders dismissed the idea of a quick trade deal and said there had to be progress on the terms of the divorce first, including the money Britain owes. But Theresa May has other ideas.
Yes, they do want to start some discussions about money. I'm very clear that at the end of the negotiations we need to be clear not just about the Brexit arrangement, the exit, how we withdraw, but also what our future relationship is going to be.
Opposition parties said the government was kidding itself.
The Prime Minister is not in charge of the agenda. There are 27 member states in the European Union, apart from the UK. They're absolutely united. They're holding a common line. And Theresa May is not going to be able to tell them what to do.
But the EU will not begin to negotiate with us until after polling day and a new Westminster government is in place. Ben Wright, BBC News.
10 years after the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, her parents have told the BBC they'll do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to find their daughter. Madeleine was 3 years old when she went missing while on a family holiday in Portugal. Speaking to my colleague Fiona Bruce, Kate and Jerry McCann said the pain never leaves them after a decade of uncertainty.
Every day is another day without Madeleine. I think it's just that number, it's that 10-year mark which makes it more significant, I think, because it's a reminder of how much time has gone by, and obviously 10's a big number.
I think that the day and the poignancy of it, that we don't tend to go back to the time because it's so draining, but inevitably on the anniversaries and on our birthday, they are by far the hardest days, by far.
How different is your life now to what you must have imagined all those years ago?
Oh, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because it's such a long time, but
I think before Madeleine was taken, we felt we'd managed to achieve a little perfect nuclear family of 5. And we had that for a short period, and you adapt and you have a new normality. And unfortunately for us, our new normality at the minute is a family of 4.
And last time we talked, you told me how you were still buying birthday presents and Christmas presents for Madeleine. Are you, with 10 years now, are you still doing that?
I still do that, yeah, and that...
So you go around the shops and you think, Madeleine would be this age now, what would she want? And
that's it. So, I mean, I obviously have to think about what age she is, and something that, you know, whenever we find her, will still be appropriate. So there's a lot of thought goes into it, but I couldn't not, you know, she's still our daughter. She'll always be our daughter.
One of the police officers in Portugal has been a thorn in your side for many years. He wrote a book which implicates you, and you fought it through the courts. At the moment, you've lost and he has won.
The last judgment, I think, is terrible. So we will be appealing. We haven't lodged that yet, but it will be going to the
because he was
European
effectively
courts.
suggesting that you were involved in the...
I think, you know,
disposed of
what
Madeleine.
people really need to realise, though, is, and, you know, Assistant Commissioner Rowley has said it again this week, and the Portuguese have said it, and the final report have said it, is there's no evidence that Madeleine's dead. And the prosecutor said, you know, there's no evidence that we were involved in any crime.
The police have talked about one significant lead that they're still pursuing. Can you tell me anything about that?
Well, we're very much, the investigation is in the hands of the Metropolitan Police. There clearly are ongoing inquiries.
We've come a long way, and there is progress. There are some very credible lines of inquiry that the police are working on. And whilst there's no evidence to give us any negative news, you know, that hope is still there. And
so it really is there in your hearts?
Yeah.
The hope that one
Absolutely.
day
I mean,
you'll be reunited with your daughter?
Yeah, well, no parent's going to give up on their child unless they know for certain their child's dead, and that we just don't have any evidence. So
my
you've
hope
got to...
of Madeleine being out there is no less than it was almost 10 years ago. I mean, apart from those first 48 hours, nothing actually has changed since then. I mean, I think the difficult thing has always been, how will we find her? You know, because you're relying on the police doing everything they can, and you're relying on somebody with information coming forward.
Kate and Jerry McCann. Until very recently, bicycle manufacturers in China were struggling for survival amidst the seemingly endless rise of the motor car. But that could be changing, and it's all thanks to the rise of bike share schemes. Harvey Biggs reports.
Air pollution is notorious in China's major cities, a problem the country's government is waging a high-profile war against. One of the driving factors behind the smog has been cars, but it hasn't always been that way. China was once regarded as the kingdom of bicycles, and for decades, two wheels dominated the streets. But as the country began opening up to the world in the 80s and 90s, cars began to take over. Today, less than 12% of commuters cycle to work, but the wheels of change are turning once again. At the Fushida Group's factory in Tianjin, the production line turns out a new bicycle every 15 seconds, 2,000 bikes every day. For the first time in decades, China is producing large numbers of bikes of the same model, colour and size. And these won't be bought by individuals. Instead, they will join the ranks of one of a number of growing bike share schemes. The simple concept isn't a new one, but is rapidly growing, reviving an industry that was struggling for survival just 6 months ago.
Back in 2015, we realized that this new model of leasing would have an impact, but the speed of market growth during the past half a year was beyond our imagination.
With China intent on dramatically reducing its air pollution levels, the return to two wheels is a welcome one. Beijing transport officials are now aiming to have 18% of the population riding to work by 2020. A target that should help manufacturers like this one keep growth on track. Harvey Biggs, BBC News.
And finally, a chance discovery by a preschool child has saved a family of owls. 3 large eggs were found in a sawdust bucket next to a compost toilet at a forest school near Winchester in southern England. Now, at first, they weren't quite sure what type of bird it was until they saw this fly from the outdoor toilet. The forest school then set up a camera and caught the father owl feeding the mother while she sat on the eggs, as you can see here. And then, lo and behold, 2 baby owls hatched. They're now a month old. And one owlet has even jumped from its bucket, as you can see down on the left there. The pair have been called Twit and Tawoo. You knew that, didn't you? This is BBC News.
Hello there, good morning. We saw some big contrast across the UK on Sunday, with the southern half of the UK seeing quite a bit of cloud and some rain. So the view from one of our weather watchers at mid-afternoon on Sunday. But at the same time, the northern half of the country, it was a pretty different day. Dry, bright, a bit breezy as well. This is the view on the shores of the Moray Firth. And I think we're going to keep similar contrasts through Bank Holiday Monday, because we've got this area of low pressure parked across the south of the UK. That'll be a focus for some wetter weather. Further north, it should be essentially dry, but quite breezy. But the breeze, at least overnight, helping to keep those temperatures up. Temperatures probably at the lowest in western Scotland, but it's here where we're going to see some of the highest temperatures as you get on into the afternoon. Now, we might just see 1 or 2 early showers in northern England, but they'll tend to fade away. And generally speaking, northern England northwards, it's dry, bright and breezy, whereas the southern half of the UK, we've got a lot of cloud, some outbreaks of rain, some showers. They'll be heavy at times, I suspect, with the odd rumble of thunder, but equally a little bit of sunshine coming and going. Not overly warm, though, only 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees. Temperature contrast across northern England. North Sea coastal areas only 10 or 11 degrees, but on the other side, we'll get up to around about 14 or 15 in Carlisle. Could hit 16, 17 in northern parts of Northern Ireland. Only 8 degrees in the eastern side of Scotland with that breeze coming in from the North Sea, but could go as high as 18 in the sunshine on the western side. Now, through the evening, still got some of those showers, potentially heavy and thundery across that central swathe of England. They're working their way ever southwards, eventually clearing away. By dawn on Tuesday, I think most places will be dry. Still a fair bit of low cloud coming in to that eastern side of the UK. Maybe some mist and some fog as well. But temperatures are holding up at 7, 8 or 9 degrees in major town cities, a little bit lower than that in some rural spots. Now, through Tuesday, as our low-pressure system drifts away towards the south, it allows a big high-pressure system across Scandinavia to become the driving force of our weather, and that'll be with us for a good few days. An easterly wind on a Tuesday drags in a lot of low cloud to the eastern side. It'll be quite cool here as well. Further west, much brighter skies, and we'll see some higher temperatures as well, 15, 16, 17 degrees in a few places, maybe 1 or 2 spots of rain to go with that cloud further east. Cloudy across the southern half of the UK on Wednesday. Still that easterly breeze and still quite cool along that eastern coast. Head further west, particularly into the north and west, and it should be a lovely day with some sunshine and temperatures will be in the upper teens here. And then towards the end of the week, a lot of fine and dry weather to be had. Still a bit cloudy up and down the eastern side, where it will be on the cool side. Head further west, that's where it's going to be warmest, particularly so in the northwest.